Hi there, you're listening to the Business Storyteller podcast by PictoChart, and welcome to Season 2. In this podcast, we speak with inspiring leaders who share their insights and experience in business and brand storytelling. Join us on this journey to learn how the art of storytelling can bring your businesses and brands to the next level. Hi there, and thank you for listening to the Business Storyteller podcast. I'm your host, Wilson, and in today's episode, we're diving into how to tell a story that sticks with the audience. Think about this. Is there a particular story from a brand that has resonated or stuck onto you? I'm sure you can think of at least a brand that you're following which has affected you in that manner. That's indefinitely the outcome of a brand that has been successful in telling a story that sticks with the audience. Today, it's my privilege to be joined by Arthur Jones, brand architect at The Art of Standing Out, consulting agency that adapts a story-driven approach to leadership and business growth. As an executive coach and brand strategist, Arthur believes that our brand stories become our business strategies. He has been helping businesses and customer-facing teams employ tools, strategies, and hybrid work models to enable collaboration and co-creation with the customers they serve. Hi, Arthur. Welcome to the Business Storyteller podcast, and I'm so glad to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Wilson, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be speaking with you today. Well, I fairly introduced you, but would you like to tell us more about your career journey and what led to your role as brand architect at The Art of Standing Out?
And so, Wilson, that's really a great question. I've had an amazing career. My career has been steeped in the business of human communications because I worked at Xerox Corporation for a very long time, which is known for making technologies like copiers. I had the luxury of working on the other side of the aisle at Xerox, which was more the technology that Xerox was not so famous for, but really, really good at. A lot of the tools we use today, the mice, the icons on the screen, the internet, as a matter of fact, were all technologies that Xerox had a hand in working with the U.S. government at DARPA to help develop. And I had the benefit of having those tools in my bag as a sales executive, going to talk to some of the largest corporations on the planet about this new amazing technology is going to change the way we communicate. And so communications is really something that's I know because of my tenure at Xerox. But I took that experience and I really allowed myself to appreciate how important that was. Xerox it is. In the lineage of human communications. Because, you're in the business of visual storytelling. And I've always been fascinated with the 50,000-year-old cave paintings in Indonesia, the 40,000-year-old cave paintings in Chauvet, France, which is how we communicated. And how amazing it must have been to walk into a cave with a torch and see those images almost galloping across. It was the 3D movie of the day. And from there to cuneiform writing, from there to Gutenberg Press. And then I had the luxury of working at one of those pivotal companies, Xerox, that did change the way we communicate. Communications is important to me. Every company I founded or worked at was always in the business of communications. It wasn't until I set up my own shop as a HubSpot inbound marketing agency that I really took a dive into storytelling. And it comes about almost by accident. I am a process-oriented person. Corporate makes you that way. And so with these small businesses that I was bringing inbound marketing to, I would ask them, so show me your business plan. And they would say, I think it's around here somewhere. They really never had one or they didn't know where it was because they wrote it 3 years ago and it's in a credenza somewhere. I wanted to see the business plan because I wanted to use that as the benchmark to show how much I would improve their position with inbound marketing. And because I didn't have it, I wanted it because I needed them to be able to measure me and give me rave reviews for the work that I did. So I tried a number of different things. And it wasn't until I landed on a question that was, tell me the story about where you are with your business and the relationship with your customers. And that's when they would rock back in their chair and say, that's an interesting question, Art. Well, and then they would begin telling me the story to the best of their ability. And I found that story opened them up to give me what I needed. So I began using that in my inbound marketing agency to check that box for understanding the variables that come from the business plan. What I learned later was my fascination with communications led to my fascination with storytelling. And Joseph Campbell in The Hero's Journey and Freytag and his arc of the story. And I did a lot of research and I learned an awful lot about the telling of stories. But it wasn't until I encountered a professor at Carnegie Mellon University who was doing work in a discipline called neuroeconomics, the neuroscience of why people buy things. Of course, I was fascinated with that, coming from a sales background and having an agency that needed to sell technology to grow. I was fascinated, and his work centered around the notion that he put people in a room, told them a story about a boy named Ben. And the story was happy and sad at the same time. He would draw blood before he told them the story, tell them the story, draw blood after they heard the story. And in the blood, he discovered that at different points, they would have cortisol in their bloodstream. And that would be fear. But the story has a really relatable story that makes you feel for the father of the boy named Ben in a material way, and you feel for the boy named Ben as well. You almost feel compassion. So he finds oxytocin, the prominent element in your bloodstream. And that, to him, was evidence that the story that he told changed the biology in those people. And I just went, wow, that's amazing. So story is even more powerful than I ever imagined. The reason that we lean into story and we get so engaged in the book that we read, or we are fascinated with the movie Shawshank Redemption, we watch it 10 times, those kinds of things, that story affects us that way. It's not just an intellectual thing, it's a physical thing. Story is a powerful tool. It helped me in my inbound marketing agency, help people tell me what they needed to tell me about their business so I could help them plan, to help them accomplish more. Story told Paul Zak, the PhD, that humans are wired for story in a way that biologically we can be changed by the type of story that we hear. For me, that meant the story is like a Swiss Army knife. And the telling of the story is important, but I recall that it was the asking of the question, tell me a story, of those business owners that opened them up to say, Art, that's a really interesting question. I haven't thought about that. Let me tell you what I know. And so it works both ways. So my career in a communications company like Xerox, my founding of businesses where I needed tools that could help me serve business owners better, story and the artful way that humans communicate has been something I've been fascinated about for a long time. And I think it's a subject that there's still so much for me to learn.
Wow, that's an incredible story by itself. And thank you for giving us like a backstory to how you first discovered, communication to storytelling. I love the question that has led to also you diving deeper into this sphere of storytelling. So I just enjoy hearing that. And of course, I want to hear more about your story as well. So let's go into the questions that we have to really discover more about the story process that we are going to be talking about, right? Yep. And today in particular, we're talking about how do we tell a story that sticks with the audience. Now, based on your insight and experience, maybe we can start off by you sharing with us, what are your thoughts about storytelling for brands and businesses at the present time?
I think that we're all challenged. There's data that says humans in 2020 have a 9-second attention span, which that in and of itself is challenging. That's kind of the attention span of a goldfish. We've changed. We move fast. We're no longer agrarian farmers that we can, at the end of the day, lean on the fence post and talk to our neighbor for an hour. We really only have 9 seconds to really dive into anything. So as storytellers or someone calling someone else to action using story, we have to have really compelling stories to tell, thoughtful and insightful, compelling stories to share. And what I believe is that from my sales executive background, a very wise sales leader said to me early in my career, Arthur, no one will ever buy anything from you if you only find the implied need. I was like, whoa, what does that mean? He said the explicit need is what you're really looking for. And he explained that to me, and I really was wowed by that, and it's guided me for decades. And it guides me in what I believe in this world of the people, everyone with a 9-second attention span. If it's just the telling of the story and we want to become good storytellers, we're missing the boat. We're really missing the opportunity. In order to move from implication to explicit understanding, I have to engage with you. And I can't sit in my car in the parking lot and do some research on LinkedIn about Wilson before I come into the building to talk to you. Is that adequate? I think what's important is if I define my ideal customer and I do the work so well that universally, I understand them so well that all of my ideal customers, I know so well that I almost know their narrative as well as they do. Then when I create stories, I'm inserting my value proposition directly into their narrative because I know it. And if they only have 9 seconds, it's hard to reject or ignore a story that's been created by a cohort of people just like you. Because you're using the same words, the same cadence, the same imagery. If all of my ideal customers like orange, and in my conference room, in my team, we sit around and say, we love purple. Purple's going to be what we're going to use. Without ever asking our customer, then we're really missing an opportunity. Some of the customers will ignore the purple and still buy from us. But if we use the orange background, it would be so much more appealing. And Stephen Covey, I think it's the 7 laws of highly successful people. Law number 5 is seek first to understand, then be understood. And that really is the hallmark, I think, of where we are today with calling businesses to action. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Remember that if you're only getting the implied understanding of what their needs are, then you probably haven't talked to them long enough, or maybe you haven't talked to them at all, and you're just concerned about your product. Engage with them. So you have 1,000 prospects. Get 6 of them, your VIP customers. Say, look, I've got this new product, and here's the story that I want to tell about this product. What does it sound like to you? And they say, oh my gosh, Art, that first part was amazing. That's going to be a great product. What about the second part? Well, I didn't get the second part at all. Then I say, well, here's what I was trying to convey about the value in the second part. How would you say it? And they say, well, if that's what you were trying to say, I would say it this way. And the other 5 chime in and say, yeah, that's right, but I would add this. And now they're collaborating to co-create a story for people just like them. I incorporate that into the first part, and I've got their addition to the second part, and I've collaborated and co-created a compelling story that will be resonant. I've got 1,000 customers. The other 995 will go, oh my gosh, that's like music to my ears, because I did the work. A 9-second attention span works both ways. If we only have 9 seconds to get someone's attention, that probably means we're only going to take 9 seconds to do the work to try and get their attention. You have to take more than 9 seconds, folks. You've got to commit to accepting the responsibility to do the work, to know the narrative of your customer if you want your stories to rock and roll.
Wow, such a great insight. And I love also you mentioning about the 9 seconds thing. And in fact, I think with the years going further and further, it seems like our attention span is also decreasing more and more. So it's essential for brands to really use storytelling as a way to engage with their audience, like what you mentioned about. Now, you talk a bit about the present just now. What do you think about the future? What do you foresee, or what do you observe? How will storytelling affect the future of brands and businesses, maybe in the next 10 years?
I think we're moving very quickly. I used to use a term a decade or more ago called digital Darwinism. Digital Darwinism is what happens when technology advances faster than people and businesses can keep up. And digital Darwinism was real 10, 15 years ago. People didn't know what social media was. They were like, oh my gosh, do I have to do this? And I still use that term, but not as often. The term I use is the one that's more viable today, and it's VUCA. It's a military term that's been embraced by business. Is the notion of volatility, uncertainty, chaos, and ambiguity is what we have in the world today. Digital Darwinism is creating some chaos. Every time there's a new technology, we have to think to adapt to it or not. Every time we think about climate change, or social unrest, or financial insecurity, or water insecurity, there's a host of things that are troubling in the world today. 9-second attention span, VUCA on the left, 9-second attention span on the right. We are highly challenged to live a good life. I think that the speed of technology is not going to abate. It's only going to increase. It's incumbent upon us to learn how to see the patterns as they approach us and to adapt. And the futurist in me could spend an hour or 90 minutes talking about VUCA, digital Darwinism, the metaverse, and how all of this stuff works together and what the probability of how we move forward. I've come to land at a place, the futurist in me has come to a place that there's the futurist that sees the patterns, and I keep my eye on that. That's the VUCA, like a tornado swirling outside my window. I got to keep my eye on it because I want to know, maybe I need to pivot or adapt, bob or weave to not let it overtake me. On the other hand, I nurture my humanness, my human skills. Why? Because today and in the future, technology is going to be doing most of the work. The algorithms, the machine learning, the big data, the artificial intelligence is already poised to do many of the things that people do. Driving trucks is going to go away. Being an accountant is not going to be required. So we're going to have to find new roles for humans to have. The one thing that the amazing technologies of today and tomorrow, for the foreseeable future, won't be able to do, have humility, empathy, compassion, things that are innately human skills. In that context, keep your eye on the ball. That tornado swirling outside your window is real. That's the VUCA. That is all the things that we know are challenging in our world, creating uncertainty and volatility and chaos. But understand that our strength is in our human skills. And empathy, for instance, or emotional intelligence. The fact that I know myself, I know my strengths, and the strengths that I don't have, I go find people that have them so I can get into my nuclear circle so they can support me when I need to ask the question. They can help me be stronger so I can stay ahead of VUCA. The opportunity, I think, is real. And I think this notion of human skills, when we nurture them, it makes us better storytellers, because this idea that do the work to know the narrative of the person that you're trying to sell to, define your ideal customer, know their narrative as well as they do. When you have a highly tuned sense of emotional intelligence, you're self-aware, you know yourself, but you're socially aware. You make space for the ideas of others. And when you make space for someone else's idea, in the way that Wilson has brought me onto his show to let me share my ideas, he's honoring me with an opportunity to sit in this chair and share my ideas. And in so doing, I will honor Wilson by doing whatever he wants me to do next. because there's a level of respect and trust that Wilson has demonstrated to me. When we show respect and trust and honor other people, those are human skills. Then we can learn about those people because they'll be open and maybe be a little vulnerable and tell us about their narrative and tell us things about the values that they have. I didn't talk about firmographics and demographics earlier, but if all you know about your ideal customer is like a line item in a spreadsheet, that they're this age, they're a man or a woman, they make this income, and they work in that industry, that's not good enough. When you know their values and what values they use to make the decisions they make, you can only learn that by engaging with them. And I don't mean to go out and talk to 10,000 people if that's how big your marketplace is. Talk to a half dozen of them and make sure they're well-defined and just like the other 9,900. And when you do that, you really will know what you need to know to call them to action. And it's not all about calling to action, to be in service to them. Because if I sell pens, I can imagine that, oh my gosh, everybody, there's 7.5 billion people on the planet. If I sold one pen to each of them, well, not everybody needs a pen. Bring value to them because you're in service to what they need. And you know when you make that offer to them and gift them your offer, you know that they're going to be changed in a positive way. And when you do that, you're making meaning in the world. And you're satisfying a human need. And it takes a highly tuned human to connect with another human. If you're just using algorithms and all the tools that we have in our tech stack, you're missing a huge opportunity. And think of it this way. We all have a tech stack. We build our tech stacks because that's what's available in the marketplace. If we pay as much attention as to the things in our human tech stack, courage, humility, emotional intelligence, empathy, compassion, if we use our human tools, the way Diogenes, the Greek philosopher, said, we have 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 1 mouth. Use them accordingly. I mean, human skills make people in businesses stronger. And if those are my last words that I would share, I think those are probably the most important words.
Yeah, I think that's such a great insight. I think one key takeaway that I get from you is this, like, as the technology would advance, in the end, storytelling is about being human again. And I like how you constantly come back to that aspect of like, you cannot replace, the tech stack with all of these things that is innate in us as human relationships, courage, like what you said. And those are the things that are so essential. So I think it's great for our brands to also consider that is the future of storytelling.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. We're talking about story today and about how powerful it is. Paul Zak, the PhD, said story changes the biology in humans. Plato, 2,500 years ago in Greece, said those who tell the stories rule society. It's always been true that story has been one of the most powerful tools in this tech stack. You can use it to call people to action, to influence people. I use it today as a Swiss Army knife to open people up, to learn about them. Tell me your story. And I'm like, tell me my story, Art? Yeah, tell me your story. And when they do, oftentimes, in the telling, they reconnect with things that they've maybe long ago forgotten that are important. Because those are the values that they stand upon. And Sir Isaac Newton, another great scientist of a bygone era, someone asked Sir Isaac, you're a prolific inventor. How do you do it? And he said, I have only seen further because I stand upon the shoulders of giants. That's the story of his success. We each have narratives like that. We all stand on the shoulders of those that have taught us what we know. Those are a myriad of stories that make the foundation of where our strength comes from. Know thyself is that keeping it human, and make story the most powerful tool in your tech stack, and you'll always have success.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Thank you for sharing so much on that particular insight. Now, I'd like to hear a bit about your story process as well, because you developed something called the 4-step story process, right? So I think that's one thing that I want to talk about as well. Like, can you tell us more about the 4-step story process, and how does that also help to be able to tell a story that sticks with the audience?
Thanks for asking that question, because it really coalesces all that we've talked about. And the 4-step process is story listening, story building, storytelling, and story doing. And the listening is really what I've spent the last number of minutes really talking about. Use story as a listening device. Do the work. Research is nothing but story listening. When I go to LinkedIn to learn about Wilson, I'm doing story listening. My research is listening to learn and seeking to understand, who is Wilson? Where's he come from? What has he done? Where's he been? And from that, where's he going with this? And then I might Google his name to find out what else I can find out that's available in the fabric of the World Wide Web. That's story listening. And I'm doing what Diogenes implored us to do. I'm using my eyes and my ears more than I'm anxious to insert my idea into the narrative. Because I figured if I listen well and learn as much as I can about Wilson, I will know what questions to ask that are in the gaps of what I don't know about Wilson. So I use story to do a real-time SWOT. I can look at LinkedIn, I can see strengths, and I might see some threats and opportunities. And where I don't have answers, I can ask the questions in those gaps. Then I have a much better picture of Wilson. And when I've done that, everybody likes talking about themselves. So when I'm asking Wilson to fill in the gaps, he's like, well, nobody's ever asked me that question, Art. And he knows that I've done some work and I've gained some respect. And of course, if we're pushing an idea, respect is certainly a collateral that we can't ever get enough of. And because with respect comes trust. So listening gives you a lot of that. The building is what I like to think of as collaborating and co-creating. It's the idea that any story that I tell that is a story that I dream up, I'm a pretty good storyteller and I love telling stories, but the story that's best is the one that I collaborate and co-create with the person that I want to tell it to. It comes from the reality that when I was in the field selling things to big companies for lots of money, I thought I was a super salesperson. It turns out, in hindsight, when I interrogated my own story to look to see where story had shown up in the past, it was on big deals that I had won, where I'd go visit this company for months, and they take me to the same conference room. I was selling technology, so I love drawing on whiteboards. Here's your infrastructure. Here's a problem. They would take me to the same conference room, and my whiteboard presentation was always there, and we'd build on it. Months and months. I was like a 33-year-old who was being honored by his mom by putting his picture on the refrigerator. I appreciated the fact that they appreciated what I knew because they didn't erase it. I knew that they knew we were making progress toward answering their questions because they didn't erase it. Visual storytelling is what was happening. That was a great sales rep, I thought. One day, the EVP that I'd always wanted to talk to because I knew that he was the economic buyer walks in the room and stops the meeting about 10 minutes in and says, Art, I'm the EVP, and now people tell me that you really know your stuff. You found problems that we thought we had and answered them and showed us how to fix those. You found problems we didn't know we had. But they tell me you have not told us what we're going to buy from you yet. And that's what made me think I was a super salesman. I kind of like, whoa, that's great. I love the way this works. The reality is what was happening in those moments was I made space for their ideas. I captured them visually on the whiteboard, and they saw the answers were there. I never once told them what products I was inserting in those pictures to fix those problems. And I thought that was selling. It was really coaching. And what coaches do is they make space for the ideas of others to lead those people to the optimal outcome. So I was not selling as much as I was coaching. And that collaboration in the process with those people that kept ushering me back into that room was powerful then, and it remains powerful today. Collaboration and co-creation, I think, is what the world needs now. We are better together. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. When you collaborate with a diverse team, you get more creative ideas, more innovative ideas. So listen means do your work. Ask the questions that are in the gaps to learn more what you don't know. Once you know what you need to know, collaborate and co-create value for the person that you're calling to action. And when you do that, the stories that you're going to tell are just going to be so compelling that the telling is the easy part. The stories almost build themselves. Because if I say, Wilson, there's 14 departments in your company that I need to get lined up to bring this value that I know you and I want to bring to your company. Here's what I heard from the 14 different entities in the business. The theme is constant, but this department wants a little of this department wants a little of that. How would you tell the story to get them all to hear that I'm satisfying each one of them? And he would say, well, I know, Art, that's a challenge. I might do it this way. Wilson lives inside that organization. He knows those people that I'm referring to. He's my inside sales contact. I'm collaborating to build this narrative. But I'm insightful enough to have seen each of the stories of the 14 different entities that I have to get on board. I get 10 of them on board. 4 of them will never come on board. But if I can tell a thoughtful, insightful, and compelling enough story about the value that I offer, it's like taking each entity and thinking of it as a circle and putting their story in the circle. And then overlapping the stories and see where the stories overlap. And when the bits that are outside the overlapping parts, you try to figure out how can I incorporate those into a story. So everybody is honored and recognized that knows I heard them and I'm bringing value to them. That's story building. And you can use story like that Swiss Army knife in this way because if you're doing enterprise class selling, you have a lot of stories that you've got to weave into one story. Do that. Don't ignore the fact that in the corporation you're probably working with, there's probably some group that does data-driven storytelling. They want to take big reams of data and visually tell the story of what that data means. You'll have to become good at doing that because you'll have a lot of data. And when you take a lot of data and you give me 15 sheets of paper that explain what's in that data, whereas you could have given me one picture, think about how to use the visual storytelling to convey 14 stories integrated into one. It's possible. But story listening, story building makes storytelling much easier. And in the story doing is if you know your own narrative and you know where your strengths are, you know where your weaknesses are. And I walk in and I tell Wilson the story of my career and my strengths and what I've accomplished. Then I have to abide by always living by that story. I can't just tell it like I'm not driven by the story that I tell. You have to tell the story of who you are because I want to know. But then you have to be intentional every day to show up to be driven by that story that you told. And that's integrity. And I think of story listening as something we do to ourselves first, to know where our strengths are, to know whose shoulders we stand upon, the places and the people and experiences that influence us and make us who we are. And that's where our values come from. That's where our integrity and our character is created. And I think it's important to know that if we show up intentionally every day, honoring all those people that shaped us, that consistency will be appreciated by the people that we serve because they'll know that Art's unwavering. He doesn't flip-flop. We know that when he says he's going to do it, he's going to do it. He's going to do it this way. And whether you're selling or you're a teammate or a leader in a corporation or a business or as a solopreneur, intentionality in showing up is a leadership trait. There's a great book written by Dan Pink. It's called The Seller's Human because he believes we all do it. I think we do. There's an idea that I have that says to lead is human. We're all leaders. We don't have to be anointed as a leader and given the role as a leader. If we embrace what leadership is in our own daily life and experiences, then we're incorporating humility and integrity and compassion and listening and creativity into what we do, but intentionally showing up every day with those things in tow. And when we do that, we're appreciated for that, and we can accomplish more. Story listening, story building, storytelling, to story doing. So it's all story driven. It makes you a better leader, and you'll accomplish so much more when you do that.
Yeah, I think those 4 steps are so foundational, essentially, to what storytelling is all about. So I love how you kind of like lay it down in details on this different process from listening to building, telling, and also we'll be sure to leave a link to your website for our listeners who'd like to find out more about this and how they like to perhaps get training, or to have you to come and do a program for them. I think on your website, you have a lot of resources on this. So we'll also be sure to leave a link at the show notes for listeners to check out more about this story process. We're coming to our final question right now. And you've seen a lot of examples and individuals or brands who have done storytelling. I mean, you are an observer, you are full on into storytelling. Now, what are some of your favorite examples of brands and businesses that you think are effective when it comes to telling a successful and convincing storytelling?
I think of Patagonia, a clothier in California, as someone that is story-driven. Yves Chenard is the founder of Patagonia. And I know Yves Chenard because there was a time where I spent a lot of time with Sierra Club and camping and using a lot of outdoorsman gear. And Yves Chenard was a purveyor of that gear. But as time went on and the VUCA of the world, the volatility, uncertainty, and chaos created by the climate change and the polluted waters and rivers and things here in America, and Yves Chenard became the standard bearer for fixing those things that existed in nature because he appreciated it so much. The seas, the rivers, the air. He carried the banner for us. And I think intentionality, he's very intentional. He turned his business into not just making clothes, but he said, okay, if you've got an old jacket that you bought from me, send it back and we'll shred it and we'll make it into a new garment. He became part of the circular economy. His values are the same as my values. And I think, companies are now embracing ESG, which is the notion that you're responsible for the environment. You really care about the things that your people in your marketplace care about. Investors now care that you care. So that notion of intentionality is what Yves Chenard has built his business on. He creates really compelling short videos about people that are diving into the oceans, cleaning up our streams and lakes and rivers, building businesses that are circular in nature, meaning that what's created goes back and always used. It's not disposable and intended to end up in a dump somewhere. Patagonia in Yves Chenard is somebody that I admire as a business, and I think there are other businesses around the world that are just as compelling and intentional about making meaning in the world as well as making money in the world.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example to look to when it comes to not only branding your product, but also the value and the mission of your organization and what you have. So thank you for sharing about Patagonia as well. And of course, for covering so much in this episode. I wish we had more time to be able to do this, but you have shared a lot of valuable and helpful insights with us today in particularly about storytelling and also a little bit on the story process. So I'm sure listeners have also gained many valuable lessons from you about storytelling and how do you then tell a story that sticks with the audience using the story process. Now, as a wrap up to this episode, I'd love to ask you some fun questions to help our listeners learn about what inspires you. So are you ready for this?
I hope so.
So my question for you is this. As a storyteller yourself, I'm sure you're intrigued by storytelling. What is a recent movie or TV show which you've really enjoyed for their storytelling?
One that comes to mind that I watched last year, actually, that sticks with me today. And I think there are other movies like this one, but this is the one that is most recent. It's a story that was produced by Marlee Matlin, which is a deaf actress who's had a great success in movie making and theater. The movie was Coda, where the family was deaf except for one of the children, the girl, who was not. She was hearing enabled. And it was the challenges they had as a family. It was the challenges they had being deaf as part of the community of fisher people. They were in New England here in America, and they had a fishing boat, and that's how they made their money to survive. And it was the compelling part of the story was not just the struggle to survive, which was really real. It was the struggle of the uniquely abled daughter who could hear, gifted with a voice that could sing like a nightingale, that the parents could not hear. So they had to come to terms with this gift that their daughter had. The tension, the arc of the story was powerful. I won't tell you what the ending was, but it was the Coda, C-O-D-A, a beautiful story of family that struggled as a family to survive, that struggled with one of their family members to bloom or not. And it was fun to watch because I, being a student of story, can usually tell what the outcome's going to be at about 5 minutes in to a movie. This one I could not. And so it was fascinating how it was put together. And it was a unique story because of the uniquely abled cast members, hearing and non-hearing, and making music a central element that a large part of the ensemble couldn't appreciate in the same way that the daughter could. Beautiful story.
Oh, sounds like a really compelling story. Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch it. And I'm sure our listeners as well who are listening to this probably haven't checked it out. Go and check it out, Coda. My next fun question for you is this. What is an app or tool that you would recommend to inspire storytelling?
Pictochart. If you don't use a tool like that today, think of your stories and think of, I doodle a lot. I am a visual. From the days of writing on whiteboards, I do that a lot. I use MindMeister is my modern day whiteboard. I can do mind maps in a myriad of different ways. And I mind map stories. I mind map business strategies. I find that I am much more creative when I see it visually, because in a mind map, I can see I have this over here and this over here. I say, oh my gosh, those two things are related. Maybe if I bring them together, I can accomplish more. And being a student of visual storytelling and a pretty proficient in mind mapping, I've incorporated it into my business, and it's a tool that I use with the clients that I serve. And they often become very adept at it as well, because being introduced to it, they say, oh my gosh, that's pretty powerful. I'd never thought about, when you think of things linear on a 66 lines on an 8.5 by 11 sheet, and you have 16 sheets, it's hard to see the relationship of the information. In a mind map, it's all right there in front of you. And what's fascinating about mind mapping for me, visual storytelling, if you will, is that Da Vinci and Michelangelo were mind mappers way back in the 1400s. So start mind mapping and using visual stories in your brainstorming sessions, and I think you'll find there's magic in those visual maps that you'll create.
Yeah, thanks for the recommendation and also for the kind shout out of using Pictochart as one of the tools to inspire storytelling. And my final question for you is this. If you are not doing what you're doing right now in the area of storytelling, what do you envision yourself doing?
I envision myself doing, I've got a picture over on the wall over here. It's a red sand beach that's about 2 miles from a black sand beach in Maui. Those two beaches are my two favorite beaches on the planet. And there's a double rainbow, and there's a little spit of island that probably is no more than 100 square feet, but there's a ginormous tree growing up out of it, and it's just offshore. It's a beautiful place. It's the kind of place where you can pull a beach chair up and put it in the sand, and if it starts to break out in the rain, you know the rainbow is going to come soon after, so you just sit there and wait for it. And you might take a spear gun and go catch lunch or something like that, just a little offshore. So that is what I might be doing if I was not in the business of being here in Arizona today, working with clients and individuals on telling more insightful and thoughtful and compelling stories.
Oh, that sounds like a dream. And yeah, thank you. That was so fun just to be able to know you on a personal level as well. And thank you so much, Arthur, for coming on this episode of the Business Storyteller podcast. Now, before we conclude, how can our listeners stay connected with you, or how can they reach you?
You can find me most readily by going to tao-im.com and come join the conversation. I love to find out what people are thinking and doing, thinking about story and how they're using it or how they're intending to use it, and maybe I can help them along the way.
Yeah, we'll be sure to leave the links to Arthur's website, and I'm sure his LinkedIn as well. So you can feel free to connect with him over there to learn more, maybe to get some training or to be connected with him to learn more about storytelling. Well, thank you so much, Arthur, for being here, joining us on this podcast. And that's all for today's episode, and until the next one.
Thank you, Wilson. Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
We hope you find this episode valuable. If you'd like to hear more, be sure to follow our podcast on Spotify or check out pictochart.com/podcast to see the rest of our episodes. The Business Storyteller podcast is brought to you by Pictochart, an intuitive platform for visual creation and video editing. Join more than 8 million people who are already using Pictochart to enhance their storytelling through infographics, presentations, and videos. Find out more at pictochart.com and sign up for a free account to get started. Once again, thank you for listening to the Business Storyteller podcast, and we'll catch you at the next one.